We'll move right in with our presentations. Good morning, everybody. I'm Georgia Bijos, and I'm delighted to see you here. Today, I will start our presentations by talking about some ideas and concepts that architects address in designing homes and in designing buildings in general. Anytime I meet people for the first time at a reception at an airplane and the topic comes up, what do you do? And I say, I'm an architect and I do residential architecture. Almost always the first question they ask is, what style do you like? What style do you do? Or even when clients come into our office for an interview, they might say, well, we looked at your website, but we think your style is too modern. Do you do traditional homes? Or the same thing happens with the same site. Your style is very traditional. Do you do modern? So style is an important aspect of how we look at architecture and for homes in which we live, and for right reasons. It is an easy way to classify buildings and homes, and architectural historians have used that as a way of communicating ideas about buildings and homes. But today, I think what we will try to do is to point out to you, and many of you know that buildings, and including our homes, or most significantly our homes, have ideas. There are design ideas behind what architects do in trying to bring about a home that will be appropriate, that will be environmentally responsible, that will support and enhance the life of people who live there. So I think that in my view, today's discussion is that about ideas, concepts about how we live, and how homes that are well designed can be so supportive of our lives and contribute to the well-being of the community. So to start with, I thought that I will talk about three ideas. There are many, and Nicole and Tina will talk about two very important concepts, the ones that Erin introduced. But for starters, because we could talk all day and all night, I selected three that are important and complement what they are going to say well, I feel. So I would like to talk about the site. I call it inhabiting the site, natural light, and this issue of materials, how architects think and design about materials in buildings, including homes. So I will take a few minutes to talk about the site, and then I will use some examples. Site design is one of the most important first steps in the design process. And I think many of you might have noticed there are sometimes homes that might be beautiful by themselves, so they have a beautiful kitchen or family room or so on. But boy, they don't belong to the site, right? Yeah, you always have seen those. And typically might be homes that were the builders, owners, homeowners, developer, architect, whoever it was, did this kind of thinking, right? They thought of a piece of land and they put a building in. What architects do is we consider, or should consider, many more as the one before, the second example of how a building, a house and so on, being the brown being the building, might occupy the site and make more rooms by how built form relates to the site, and Tina will talk more about that. So when we begin design, we do this kind of thinking, placing buildings so that they relate to the site, they address issues of existing features, be it topography, the orientation to the sun, existing elements, be it beautiful trees, existing landscaping, water features, views near and long, and significantly the context, the neighborhood. Is it a rural site? Is it an infill site in a neighborhood? All of those will affect our decisions, and they'll be the first moves that we make. And they're very significant because if you don't get it right at that level, a lot of things will not work. So the considerations of the site are paramount and at the beginning of a good design. And they do shape the final form of the house and its character, or its style if you want, eventually. So let's look at some more examples. Here is an example I selected that to talk about incremental growth. Again, Tina will address that in more detail, that sometimes what happens with homes are that they are built. Here is one in a historic district as an example where in 1820 there was a building at the corner with a gable roof, and then through the years additions have been made. And I do have a blown up example of what that 2001 addition was, where good designers, architects in this case, added and moved buildings on the site to make that site and the buildings and the existing house serve the current owners, but also respect the neighborhood, respect the style if you want. This is that Cook Street image with the garage. So we could see that incremental growth, and we can see that it really, in my mind, what I'm trying to convince you is that style doesn't matter here. It's the design concepts about the site that might more importantly and significantly affect the character of the house. Other times, this is an example of the site that might be more rural, and the site had a stream through the middle. So in many ways, the first attitude might be to put a house on this side or that side. But in site analysis, the architects realize that if you do that, a lot of the site is wasted. Not wasted, you have views, but anyway, the stream separates the site. So the decision was to put the building bridging, to put the house bridging the site. Here is a close-up, and of course orientation, making wings. I'll talk about this in the next issue about lights, so that you see how every room has light from more than one direction, probably 2 or 3, and that the house connects across the bridge. And here is that bridge connection. So I would like to point out that if you came to these architects and had this site, you will never say in your program, and oh, by the way, I need a bridge as a space in the house, right? So this issue of describing homes in a shorthand, the 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, it's very useful. It's a shorthand in talking about a house, but it really leaves a lot out. And again, I would like to point out that the design of the owner's needs and what is significant in the site brings about places, indoor and outdoor places, and designing for wonderful houses that emerge from the site, emerge from the process rather than a preconceived notion of a bedroom and a family room and a bathroom and so on. Topography is the culprit of many sites that have difficult topography, either get bad houses or are not built. My joke is architects inherit them. Often developers will move into a neighborhood, build on every site that is easy to build, both regarding expense but also designs that are applicable, typical designs, and then these small lots, steep lots, and so on are left over, and we inherit them. If you buy one of them, you have to hire an architect, and it's wonderful. We can do it well. So here is an example. This is a view of I'm sorry. Yes, I'm attached. I forget. I'm a teacher and I pay, so I'll stay there. Anyway, from the street, the stairs that take you upstairs to outdoor spaces that the designers made. So the house protects the heart, the back, from the street, and creates wonderful places for people to be. And again, Tina will talk a little bit more about that. Another example to talk about topography and to try to convince you that, at least in my mind, the style is not important. The site and the design of the site is important. Here is a rather steep site. It's an example in California where the designers created the orange spaces, the outdoor spaces, as courtyards. So the house becomes its own site regarding outdoor spaces. An example very different from the previous one that also exemplifies how these two homes demand different designs because they are not on the same site. and probably here they're not on the same climate and so on, but we're talking about site and climate here. So again, does it matter in my mind that this is stucco and has tile roofs, or the other one was wood? And no, it's appropriate. As I said, the other one was in the North Pacific. This is in California. So indeed, and we'll talk about materials, all of those things make sense. But most importantly, the response was that to the site. Here's another example that I like that talks about how architects also claim or inhabit a site by simple ways of creating walls in the landscape. I also have the site plan for this to show you where the house is, and then these ideas of these semi-courtyards that there is again here a nice stream there, so that the architecture, and with some very simple moves of placing some walls, you can argue that these walls don't do much really, right? They don't create privacy, but they do claim the land. They extend the house into the landscape. So I think it is a very subtle and strong way to say that this part of the land is also part of the house, or to invite habitation. We could see that we might go out there and sunbathe on a sunny day, or take our coffee, or have our friends who are visiting and have a party, or I don't know if you could fish in the stream, but maybe you can. Okay, so to summarize, let me tell you some of the strategies that I tried to, I'll be mindful of the time, to exemplify with my examples. We did talk about unique sites, so establishing and understanding the hierarchy of a site. We did talk about the issues of addressing orientation, the relationship to the sun, the topography, and the context. With this last example of making wings out of a building and claiming the site and creating outdoor spaces. And certainly, I would like to suggest that one issue that I did not mention that is important about sites is that of circulation. One of the first moves, understanding how cars and people arrive, and organizing the placement of buildings on the site so that the unique places are preserved. We don't build at the places that are the best. We preserve them to enjoy them. But also so that parking or a road, nothing can ruin a site, as we all know, as a road, right? So where do people come? So the circulation from the public realm through the site to the house and then beyond the house is critical. I did not exemplify or discuss that, but it is an important aspect of site design. So now I will move on to the next topic I selected, natural light. The best compliment I have gotten as an architect was from a client a few years ago. We did an addition, a simple addition to a house, and one of the issues that the owners had identified was that the house was dark. It was a modest house near the museum here. And during the design process, I must have, because light is one important aspect for me as a designer, and I love it, so I must have been going on and on about the light and how wonderful the light will be, and if we have this window high up here, it will do this and that and the other. And they were convinced, they had identified that as an issue, but I think I did notice that maybe I was more excited about that than they were. But after the house was built, the best compliment for me as a designer was, the owner of the house told me, "Thank you, I never understood how natural light could positively affect my daily life." So that is really what I want to say about light. So natural light in homes is of paramount importance. Sometimes people hire us when they are trying to buy homes, and they like a home and they say, well, does not suit us well, and so on. The first thing we do as architects, you walk on the site, and I can tell why they don't like it. The garage is facing the southeast corner. The living room doesn't get any natural light, and so on. How many of you know the orientation of your home? Fantastic. So I'm preaching to the choir here, so let's move on. You can imagine how many people don't. At an interview, when people say we would like to, again, maybe the light is not right, or we want to add a family room or a bedroom, and I say, where is where does the sun rise at your home? And they say, And then they start thinking, oh yes, when we're having coffee in the morning, this corner is in the sun. So let's move on with some examples. I think you'll enjoy them. I'll try not to say much. I have these trying to convince you that, again, in my mind, it's not, I don't know, what would you classify this? Is it modern? Is it traditional? I think a good architect made it so that it is of that place and time. It has siding, and the structures are exposed, has interior windows, but I do think that the thinking here is that sculpting with light and making memorable places. I would say the same about this. I love this room. Maybe it is also that it's spacious, it's not crowded, but if we can imagine that wall without windows, this will not be a good place. So, and architects think like that when they look at the plan, when they look at an existing house where we are designing for our clients. I love this example because we often think of a fire as a dark corner, right? And oftentimes fireplaces, especially in our climate, because we don't need them throughout the year, for 6 months, 9 months of the year, it's a dark corner in the living room or in the family room. Here is a good example of how an architect was mindful of that and made the place where the fire is also relate to light and views. A good example, this house needs privacy. This room is close to the street, so even a light that brings light from two sides in this little room is significant. So again, if we can imagine this room without that window, it won't be as good, and certainly without this plentiful light, it relates to a courtyard, it will not be as good. And again, what style is this room? It's a wonderful room because of the light. Clear story windows at 2 levels, above the doors and higher. Light from above is critical. Light from 2 sides of a room is critical. Use that as a test, since you're all interested in architecture and look at houses. If you walk in a room, if you like it, most probably it will have light coming from 2 directions. And if it's a spacious room, it will probably, if you like it, it will have light coming from high up. One of the mistakes that sometimes people make in building homes and they're giving them height, they don't have light coming from above, and the top becomes this cavernous, dark space. It's not as exciting. Again, I will say, I don't know, I have not talked to the architects of this building, but I will say they were very much sculpting. They were creating space with light in mind. That light was a driving force in their thinking. In circulation spaces, we oftentimes forget how important it will be, how wonderful it will be to have stairs that you can walk towards light, or even corridors. Again, look how nicely the high light comes from the left, but also from high above. Can you imagine this corridor without the light at the end of the room and the light to the left? It wouldn't be a good place. And sometimes we can screen porches or rooms that are these in-between rooms that can really accept light in are wonderful places that architects can create for us. Here is an example of light from 2 sides of a room. This architect, and actually that is him there, David Salmela, has lined up 2 windows in this room so that you can see shotgun style through. And this is in the entry to this home and so on. A wonderful example. That room feels much larger and this entry feels more inviting because of that concept of where windows were placed and how they brought in light. I have focused a lot on the light of the room to interior spaces, but I would like to also point out that in the examples I think I showed you, and in architecture in general, the consideration of light also shapes the form of the building and its exterior, right? So the sculptural qualities and how a house is experienced is also an important aspect. So we design windows not only for light, which I emphasized here, but also for views, but also what they do to the exterior spaces that the house or the wall in which the windows exist create. And I will exemplify that a little bit. At the end of this presentation, I have some examples that put these three ideas together, or so I think. You can tell me if I'm wrong. So in summarizing, we did talk about the orientation of light. It is critical that we know where the sun comes from, because one nice thing as designers is that light is easy. We know where the sun rises, and the solar geometry is known and will not change, at least as long as the sun rotates around the Earth. So it is very easy to design with that in mind, and to shade windows that need shade in certain times of the year for eliminating heat gain or glare in the rooms that we want, but so designing the windows in their elevations, but also placing activities with appropriate windows, as I said, for the quality of light and for views. It's something that we always do, and again, contributes so much to the character of the house. So I would like to say that natural light shapes our homes in significant ways, and indeed enhances our lives in significant ways. So architects compose with light, I would like to say, whether it is interior spaces or exterior forms. It is one of our tools. It's an important tool in our palette for the wonderful places that we make. Let's move on to the next topic, materials. And I chose that because often we forget that in residential architecture, we do have choices about materials, right? We traditionally think that a house is wood, brick, or stone type of thing. But in our designs, we do consider materials because they do contribute, again, so much to the character of the house. The characters of the places within the house. Here is, I believe, a wonderful arcade, colonnade, porch, and you can tell that the architects here, I don't know if it is clear, but it has this brick floor, a stucco wall, the structure is exposed, the plantings, corrugated metal wall at the end with a window. Architects, by the way, love to figure out ways to use materials in different ways. Use exterior materials inside, put the use of something in such a way that it is used in a new way. It is a wonderful challenge we have, and sometimes we do it for economic reasons, might be cheaper, and also, but most often about the character that it creates. And I would like to emphasize that sometimes it is the same material. Everything here is wood. So we do also compose, and we do consider how materials are put together or connected or create a depth and texture in our buildings. I love this example for that purpose. It didn't happen. Somebody was designing here, right? Somebody was thinking, where does one surface end and how it connects to another, and how the wood, the same material used at all of these places, might add some interest, differentiate, unite, and so on a place. And here the palette, and that example was one single palette, another example where wood and concrete block, but here color is used as a way to also add complexity and to differentiate between lower level and upper level and so on. So rather than surfaces that are not interesting to differentiate in the volumes, the forms of the house. more examples of using the same materials in different ways. I would say wood here. Or this is actually a prefab house. Some of you might know the WEE houses, W-E-E. They're manufactured in Minnesota. A tiny house, but I love it because of the color and the siding. Again, somebody was, because if you look at this house, without these compositions of materials and color and siding, it's a trailer, right? But I wouldn't mind having this house or looking at it in my neighborhood, and again, using the same material and going a little bit wild with the colors. Maybe it's appropriate to the context. We often think, oh, you know, this wall is stone, everything has to be stone. You can see here examples how skillful designers can mix materials and brick and stone and wood and concrete in wonderful ways that make strong, cozy spaces, rather than some things that they look as if they were not thought through. Even steel beams or concrete blocks and concrete floors and cable railings can add to or be contrasted with materials such as the softness and the warmth of the wood. Structure becomes a way to express materials and compose interior and exterior spaces, and more of the same, contrasting materials, contrasting colors. Using, as I said, industrial materials. I don't know if you can tell, but the risers on this stair are this metal lath, and put in place concrete, the warmth of the wood, and so on. So here are some examples of putting it all together. I will just run through them. Again, David Salmela's work. He practices in northern Minnesota and uses a lot of vernacular forms and very inventive ways of using side and light and materials, sculpting interior spaces, again, light and materials. And responding to side, we can tell that the windows were such that they create privacy but also bring light. Another home, we might say that is traditional, but it's not. That puts, we can see how the different sides of the home are different because they respond to the side. Yeah. Again, if you have this side, you need to do something special here. You should not worry about if it is colonial or neo-Georgian, right? You need to be at that corner and look at the view or enter a home this way. So I hope that I have convinced you that architects design with ideas in mind. And these are only a few. We could talk about many more. Maybe next year we'll have another series, or next semester. And I have many examples that I could talk about and stories to emphasize this, but we can do that during the question and answer time. And I would like to invite Tina, who will talk about the concept of flexibility, a larger concept in the design.